Good evening, everybody. I hope everybody's well. Tonight we are going to be talking about bar shoes, or the bar shoes that I use on a regular basis anyway. Um, there's various bar shoes around. Obviously, there's a lot because you can just shove a bar in it. But we're going to be talking about why I use bar shoes and yeah, the common ones that I use on a regular basis. So your main ones, the main two that you hear about are a heart bar shoe. This was dragged off my scrap pile about 5 minutes ago, and a straight bar shoe. So they're the two different types of bar shoes. A lot of people also use an egg bar. I don't tend to use too many of them, but here's an egg bar insert, and it sits in like that, and it creates an egg. It's pretty simple. Um, the main reason that we use bar shoes is for support, and that's to support the foot for various cases, and also to support the limb. Um, so the so that's the reason that we do any form of shoeing, really, isn't it? For support and stability. A lot of the time, we're using a bar shoe because the horse has got an injury or a compromised foot, and we want to dissipate that load out and use 360 degrees worth of support for that horse, be it in a heart bar where we're loading through the frog, or in a straight bar where we're just loading through the back of the foot, or a spider bar where we're centralising that loading, or a centre bar again where you're centralising that loading, or an egg bar which gives you more support sticking out the back of the foot. And there's lots of different nuances to it. So I just thought I'd talk briefly about why I use certain bar shoes and how they help certain horses. I would say probably my most used bar shoe is a hind heart bar on a dressage horse. This is, as I said, taken off a dressage horse. I don't know when it was. It was on my scrap pile. But I use them a lot because of the surface interaction that that horse has to use for its hind end. So when a horse is loading, or a horse in normally should take 60% of its weight through its front end and 40% of its weight through its hind end. Obviously, when you put a rider on top, that changes, and when you're doing your high end movements, be it in dressage or show jumping or any of the other disciplines, you quite often change that weight proportions to the back end rather than the front end. And so actually what you're trying to do is you're trying to support that back end, sorry, from doing a movement that it's not naturally designed to do for a prolonged period of time. So with that, I find that a lot of my dressage horses, as I said, like a hind heart bar shoe, and because actually you can give it support to the back of the foot, and you can put that frog plate in there. Obviously, frog plates are, you've got to be careful with how you fit them, and whether you want to give them different types of load and pressure. So you have negative pressure, neutral pressure, and positive pressure with a heart bar. And negative pressure is where that bar is always floating. And neutral is when it's floating and during unload, and then when it loads, it takes pressure on the frog. And a positive pressure heart bar is when that frog is always loading. So yeah, that's the three types of pressures. But with my dressage horses, I tend to use a neutral pressure. It loads under load, and then it supports that horse when it's working on that surface, and it gives it a little bit more support because we don't want that horse sinking into the surface too much. And because what you can find is the further down that limb sinks into the surface, the more effort it takes for that horse to move out of that surface. And if you can help it by sitting on top of the surface a bit more, then it's not going to have it's going to take less effort, which means that it can put more power into its movements as a general entity. Heart bars, or all bar shoes, come in many different shapes and sizes. This is an aluminium heart bar shoe. I don't tend to use too many of these. I've got them on a few performance horses, and this is a Coloni roller heart bar. You can see it's really rolled. and I love using these as a transition from a clog for a laminitic, from a clog with a cast on it. I then quite often transition it to one of these aluminium roller shoes because they're really, really light, and they've got a big surface area and a massive roll which facilitates movement. Transition them from a clog to one of these with a cast on, and then we'll end up taking the cast off and just have the dental impression in the middle, nailed on, and then we will be overall just transition them hopefully back into a normal shoe over a period of time. And I've found that works quite effectively with the laministics that we've been treating over the last few years. So that's the basics on the heart bar shoe. A lot of the most important part is actually where you fit this frog plate, because you don't want it too far forward, and depending on what you're treating and what pathology, you don't want it too far back either. So that's where, especially if you're going for a laminitic, your x-rays are really important, because you want that frog plate, to be exactly where you want it to be, because you can cause excess pressure in various locations within the foot if you fit it in the wrong place. I'll quite often, if I want a bit more than a straight bar, grind a frog plate down. So what you can do on the grinder is grind this all the way down to say here, and actually that would just give a little bit more pressure, a bit more support to the back of that foot, but without causing too much undue pressure. A straight bar shoe. Oh, this is another example of a heart bar actually. I showed this last time, and that came off a laminitic, and that's an open toe heart bar. And again, this was in a cast. This was actually in a full cast all around the bottom of the foot as well. But this was in a cast, and it went all the way up around the foot. This part here was floated. The bottom bit was floated, sorry, so that there was no pressure at all on the toe. And then and then we transitioned that horse out, and now that's in just a standard unclipped Kirkhart 3x0 front with a Ibex pad on it and some magic cushion underneath, and she's doing really well. So a straight bar shoe. This is a straight bar shoe, and for me, I'd use a straight bar shoe if I just want to give a bit of support to the back of the foot, quite often on a front foot. Although I have had hinds in the past with a straight bar. An example is this hind shoe. That's a lateral extension straight bar shoe, and it just gives a little bit more support to the back of the foot. So as that horse sits down and loads through the back of its foot, it just takes a bit more of the pressure off it. And that's all that you're doing. You're taking the pressure off it, but because it's a bar, the way that I see it in my head is that you're locking that foot in place a little bit more, which has its pros and cons. You know, we've discussed barefoot versus shods, and actually shoes locking up feet a little bit, and how there's pros and cons to all of this, and if you go into it with an open mind, you'll get the best result for your horse. If you want to have a look at that, it's on Facebook or Instagram. They're recorded live, so have a look back for a couple of weeks ago, and there was the barefoot versus shod one on there, and that was quite interesting. If you're finding this is good information, then please like it and share it with other people, because actually that gives the word out there that there's knowledge out there that's not. I'm just trying not to be biased on anything and just tell you my experiences. So I use a straight bar just to give a bit more support to the back of the foot, and by using these inserts, so this is an egg bar insert rather than a handmade bar shoe. Again, it's personal preference, but it allows me to use it as a bit of a Meccano kit. So actually, if I go, I need it here, here and here, I don't have to carry about 8 ounces worth of steel in the van. I can just use an insert to put it exactly where I want it. Excuse me. Exactly where I want it on that shoe, and then I can grind it back, and I can add material or take material away in a really easy fashion by using it straight out of the van. Which means that when we go to some of our dressage yards or some of our eventing or jumping yards, or if you just turn up to a new horse and actually you look at it and you think it's going to be an easy set, and you turn up and suddenly it's got an injury or it's a laminitic or something's happened to it, you've got the facilities there to to deal with that process. I use quite a few spider bars as well. This is a spider bar. Most of the time these are filled with packing, either a dental impression or a pad soft, so a soft pour-in pad. That one itself came off another dressage horse, but I do use them quite a lot, especially for horses that have a sheared heel. So a sheared heel is where, if you look at the bulbs of heel from the back, one side is considerably higher than the other side, and I find that they help stabilize those feet quite a lot, because again, they lock that foot in and they stop it from moving. You can float that heel if you want to, which allows it to sink down a little bit onto that shoe over a period of time, and then by filling the middle up with a soft pack or a pad, a packing of some description, depending on the horse's needs, you allow that foot to just stay contained, which over time allows it to grow down from the top in a better fashion than it would be doing if it was left to its own devices. Again, you can argue that sheared heels and everything are potentially a human-made problem, a man-made problem, and to a degree they are. But again, it goes down to everything. Actually, if your horse needs a bit of a hand, then that's where you can help your horse by using different types of bar shoes. So for those of you that just joined, we're talking about bar shoes. We've had a bit of a chat about the heart bar shoe, the straight bar, and the spider bar, and those are really the three shoes that I use on a regular basis. I do like a centre bar, so a centre bar sits like this across the centre of the shoe, or kind of the centre of the shoe, a bit further back. I tend to use them around that area, but for me, I don't put that many on. I do like them though when you have a horse with a navicular problem and you want to protect that navicular area and take that pressure off that area. They're also quite good rather than a hospital plate sometimes if a horse has got a little pinprick of an injury there or a hole, and actually they want to dress that with medicated dressing. But I've only done that once and it worked to a degree, but we ended up putting a hospital plate on it anyway. But yeah, these bars are quite good. Again, you want to be using them with x-rays because you want to be knowing exactly where that navicular or the area that you're trying to protect is in relation to your foot, the hoof, and where you're going to be placing that shoe. So if you've got a vet that's up for it and you're allowed to take as many x-rays as you want, which doesn't happen that often, then you can position your shoe, put it on with a couple of nails, and then weld in your insert, put it on with a couple of, or just tack weld it, put it on with a couple of nails, and take another x-ray and just see if that has any help, and whether it's positioned in the right place. Sorry. And again, heart bars for laminitic, I quite often try and get an x-ray before if I'm nailing on a heart bar to a laminitic, with a vet there, we'll get an x-ray taken as we're nailing, or as we've put a couple of nails in, just to make sure that everything is in the right place and it's all stacked up. Slightly different with the clog because you don't need that as much, but definitely with your heart bars and your laminitics, and anything that you've got an internal problem that you're trying to help with that shoe, if you can get an x-ray with it, then you can get your points all in alignment, and actually then everything works really well. So yeah, they're the main bar shoes that I use on a regular basis. As I said, we probably put on more hind heart bars than anything else. A lot of our dressage horses seem to prefer it that way, but just different people, different kicks. The 3D printed pads, I like those, and again they're kind of like a bit of a heart bar. For me, there's a bit too much movement in them at the moment for what I want to achieve with those feet. But again, they work with other people and the way that they're doing it. And I've got various horses that we've got in those 3D printed pads, and they're doing well in it. but it's just about working out what your horse is doing, and then how you want to help its feet, because a lot of horses have compromised feet, and then how you can go about it. With it all as well, if you're doing it for a performance reason, I find that some horses live in them, and they do, because they're performing all the time and it really helps them. However, some horses, and a lot of horses, we try and get out of all the gubbins once their feet have got to a better place, and then you can just leave them in an open-heeled shoe or take them barefoot, depending on what you're doing. So yeah, that's the long and the short of it. That's our brief discussion into bar shoes. I'd like to go into them a bit further in detail, but I've currently got a screaming child, so if anybody knows a good way of putting a 2-year-old to sleep and getting her to stay asleep when it's an hour and a half, 2.5 hours past their bedtime, then knock yourselves out. Give me a shout. Thank you very much for joining in. Anybody got any questions before I scoot off? Don't think so. Have a look on Instagram. No. If people found this of value, then please like it and share it. And there won't be a live stream next week because I've got a meeting on Monday evening, or not on Monday anyway, but I will try and fit one in at some point next week. And again, we'll possibly be discussing glue-on options, but if anybody's got anything they want to talk about or any more information they want to find out, then shoot me a DM and hopefully we'll pick that up and then we can have a chat about it on a later date. Yeah, it was good to see everybody, and everybody have a good evening. Cheers, guys.